If you were like me growing up, you might have had parents tell you to go get a hobby or do something useful with your time, or maybe you say that to your own kids. But I remember thinking as a kid, I have no idea what to do, or I don't know even what a hobby is or which one to pursue once I figured out what a hobby actually was. I just wanted to play video games. But what if your kids didn't have to come up with their own hobbies? What if there was an organization that was designed not only to help kids have a hobby, but that also cultivated things like leadership skills, hard work, communication skills, critical thinking, loyalty, and an understanding and appreciation for health? Well, there is such an organization, and today that's what we'll be talking about. Hi, I'm Daniel Roberts, and I'm a local realtor here in Newberg, Oregon, and I'm also a member of the Newberg Noon Rotary Club, an ambassador for our local Chamber of Commerce, and I also have a separate YouTube channel about the real estate-related aspects of this town. But I love this town, and I love helping people move here, and I really love sharing stories about all the great organizations and individuals who make this town the great place that it is. And that's really the heart and soul of this podcast, to share stories that inspire people in Newberg and the surrounding area to be inspired, get involved, and ultimately have hope for our future. Today, I'm talking to Rainey Salmonson about the 4-H Youth Development Program. Rainey grew up with 4-H and will share a little bit about her journey to where she is now. You'll also hear how Rainey's own daughter was transformed by this program, and if you're a parent like me, by the end, you might find yourself looking up how to get your kids involved. Well, here's my conversation with Rainey. Well, Rainey, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to really personally learning more about 4-H and also getting the word out in the community about the 4-H program here in Yamhill County, and just kind of educating people about what 4-H is and what it does.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So most people have heard about 4-H, well, most likely, especially in the more rural areas, but maybe don't know what it is. So I grew up actually thinking 4-H was kind of exclusively just working on farms with animals, but have since learned that there's a little more to it than just that, even though that may have a significant part. So part of this is for me, and part of just like educating people who've listened or who are listening to say, okay, I don't know what 4-H is at all. So would you mind sharing just kind of a basic overview of what 4-H is and how it works?
Sure. Yeah, you're right in that a lot of people associate it with agriculture or farming, different kinds of traditional animal science, sewing and cooking. And we do still have those project areas that are very much alive and well in Yamhill County. But 4-H is also a lot more than that. We have art, photography, we have all kinds of communication projects, we have family consumer sciences still alive in Yamhill County, but basically it's about learning and civic engagement, and how do we keep our youth involved and interested, and we deliver that kind of programming in a variety of different ways. It started out in the early 1900s, and it was affiliated with school programs. And that was, at that time, mostly a focus on agriculture, like you talked about. But since then, it's grown and evolved. We still have club-based programs, but we also have school-based programs that come in and deliver educational programs after school, and pretty much anything that you can name. Natural science, beekeeping, we have robotics here in Yamhill County, so lots of different types of projects.
Wow, so how did 4-H actually get started? You mentioned it started kind of with schools, but what was the driving force behind it?
Yeah, here in Oregon was one of the first states.
Oh, okay.
And there was a school superintendent here in Yamhill County who brought together in the early 1900s sort of a showcase of agriculture. And so we are home to Oregon's oldest fair, actually, in Yamhill County.
Oh, wow.
In
okay.
McMinnville at the fairgrounds. And the idea was to
So it started here in Yamhill County?
As far as Oregon, the first fair was here in Yamhill County.
Oh, wow.
So we have the oldest, longest running fair of all the counties in Oregon.
Well, that's
here.
cool.
So yeah, kind of exciting. So the idea was to, there's projects that youth might work on that would take all year, like raising a hog. And so they could bring those to fair to show and then eventually go to market. Or it could be a sewing project that a youth worked on over a long period of time. And then they bring that to the county fair to go ahead and share with the public and be able to answer questions and see what other people are doing and engage that way.
Yeah. So it started with, if I understand right, so a superintendent kind of had the idea of these long projects that a student might have for them to basically do that under the umbrella of 4-H. So they're kind of like receiving guidance or supervision for that. Is that?
Yeah. Okay. The idea is to engage with larger communities outside of just your own family, so that you can share with others, but also to contribute, understand what your place in the world is. And we know now, fast forward to the future, that leads to better long-term outcomes for youth as far as civic engagement and vocational success and wellness and happiness.
Okay. So what is the 4-H? I know that, and there's the clover, the 4-leaf clover, that's kind of the logo. So where does that come from?
So I'll talk a little bit about the 4-H's first, what those stand for. They stand for head, heart, hands, and health. So we take it a little further with the 4-H pledge. So we're pledging our head to clearer thinking, our heart to greater loyalty, our hands to larger service, and our health to better living. So that 4-H emblem is now a protected emblem that has restricted uses as far as 4-H clubs and what they can do with it. It has got its own branding, which, since we're part of Oregon State University Extension Service, we have certain guidelines on how we can use that. But when you go to a club meeting, for example, you might see the 4-H flag with that emblem on there. And oftentimes our club will start their meeting with that pledge.
Okay.
So.
And then where did the logo come from?
I actually don't know the exact source of where the logo came from. I'm not
Which
sure.
I know a lot of people don't know where their logos come from.
I'm not positive about that.
Because I had no idea until actually when I was doing a little bit of research for our conversation. I got to at least know a little bit about 4-H. Which is funny too, because my wife had just been talking about how, like, I really want our son, so we have a 4-year-old son. She's like, I really want him to be in a 4-H program. And I think it was like the next week where I met you at the Chamber of Commerce Readers event. I was like, this is perfect. And I would also love to learn more. And I think it's also a valuable asset to the community to have, and I think we can talk about it later, like what it takes to get involved. But you also mentioned that it was a part of OSU, so the Extension Service. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, or what that is?
Yes. There was an act in Congress in 1914 that established Extension at the national level. So that created a relationship between colleges of agriculture and land-grant universities to form Extension Service. So here in Yamhill County, we have an Extension Service office in McMinnville. 4-H is just one of the programs that Extension provides. We also have a forester, for example, there. We have a Master Gardener program. We have a Small Farms program. So there's also a Master Preserver program. So if you have questions about, is my canner safe? You can take it in there. You can take classes, lots of different educational events, or it's a source for research. We have this bug invading our house. What do we do about that? So that's kind of how that was established. And then each of the land-grant universities in the various states established county extension programs, 4-H being one of those. So here in Oregon, we have a 4-H program in each county. So there's a 4-H program coordinator, of course, varying in size depending on the population of the county and the demographic.
Okay. Very interesting. So, and I had no clue about, I think until, again, we had talked about the extension service or how that works. So what are other extension services within Yamhill County?
So within our office, I mentioned that we have a forester. So, working on healthy forests around their small woodlands management. So if you're a wood owner and you have, 20 acres of forest, how to best manage that. And I mentioned the food preservation. So if you want to learn to do that, but you want to make sure that you do it safely, there's a lot of publications that are available. You can walk into the office and ask questions, pick up those publications.
Interesting. So someone can just walk into the office, and if they've got any of these kind of like specific to a more rural area need, like whatever these are, like so forestry or food preservation. So it's just kind of an open resource.
Yes. Absolutely. Small Farms is another one. There's a big Small Farms conference coming up that's down on the OSU campus, but like our Small Farms extension agent is one of the speakers there.
Okay.
So all across Oregon, small farms gather together and they talk about, different educational items, maybe pollinators on their farm or, different crops and so forth.
Okay. And so then 4-H is one of those, which is then essentially, kind of an overview, a club that children can join from ages, was it 5 to 19?
5 to 19,
Okay.
That is correct. Yeah. And those younger kiddos starting from age 5 up to age 8, that's a special program called Clover Buds.
Okay.
And so there's a few differences, but first of all, they don't handle large livestock. Just not developmentally appropriate. So not with a horse, not with a hog.
Yeah.
But they can have small animal projects. They can do things like art, sewing, cooking, some of those more hands-on types projects. And that's kind of a preparation program for once they reach age 9, as of September 1, then they enter as a regular 4-H member. And at that time, they're able to actually enter in competitive events at county fair.
Okay.
And other events during the year. And bring their projects, and then they can choose any project that they would like, including the larger animal livestock ones.
Okay, cool. That's pretty sweet. And I want to get more into that, but first I kind of jumped the gun because I wanted to hear more about your story, specifically how you got involved with 4-H, like kind of what your background was that led you to what your role is now.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was a 4-H'er in Yamhill County.
Okay.
Awesome memories of that time and what that meant for me just in my walk in life. And I was a horse project member. That's all I did. I didn't do other project areas. Later, I became a leader when my own kids became of age in horticulture. And I was part of a local club here called Bacon Bits and Friends. And they've been around for a very long time. They're a large community club. Fast forward a little bit from there, I went on to become a K-12 educator. So I've spent almost 20 years doing that. And then within about, I guess, the last 2-3 years, I realized I wanted to switch gears because I wanted to be part of that experiential model that 4-H uses for educational programming. And that is hands-on, in-person, engagement with community, contributing to community, giving back. Yeah. So that's what drew me to 4-H. And I happen to still know some of the members that I was involved with as a leader and as a kid in 4-H here in Yamhill County.
Oh, wow. So
that was great to have some connections already to the program here.
2-3 years ago was kind of a hard time to get involved with hands-on for some person.
Because I went to virtual like all other educators for a while.
Which sounds like it's really hard to do with 4-H.
For that reason we're currently rebuilding our programs after COVID.
So you mentioned some of the activities kids do, and we'll get more to that. I'm kind of curious, what does it actually look like? So say there's a family here in Newberry that says, hey, we want our kid to be involved with 4-H. Mm-hmm. They don't really know anything. Like, we want the kid out of the house to go do something useful, learn something. What are kind of the next steps?
Yeah, the next steps would be to reach out to the office, talk to either me or we have an administrative program specialist, Vicki Smith, who has been there this is her 20th year. Okay. Also came up through the 4-H program, so she knows a ton of stuff. So to reach out, and we would ask just a few questions, like what are the interests of your kids? Or, some kids don't know. Some kids come ready, like, I want to be in a horse club, or I want to do archery. So we then also find out where in the county do you live, because it's, long distance between the edge of Newburgh all the way to Sheridan, even bordering up with Willamine and Grand Braun. Yeah. So where do you live? What's the access? What are the interests? And then what we'll do is we'll get to our club list. We have over 30 clubs right now in Yamhill County, and we'll try to find a match. Some of those clubs will close, meaning they won't have space anymore. So we'll try to match based on interest and geography. Okay. And we'll then arrange for a visit to the club, and we'll give the contact information for the leaders of the club, who are all volunteers, and recommend going out for a visit, and then go in and making a decision about that. We can send to another club if they want to try another one out, and make a decision. And once they're ready to enroll, then they do all that back with us through the office. Gotcha.
Okay. So between it was the Clover Buds, right, is the name of the young ones, and the older group, there's 30 combined, kind of spread out through Yamhill County.
Yes.
In each club, does each club have its own focus? So one might be doing, like you said, yours exclusively horses. Other people might be doing, you said, like robotics or sewing. So does each club have its own area focus?
Yes. Okay. Most of the clubs are project specific, but like our horse members, they oftentimes will pick up something like photography or maybe even public speaking in that communications area as an add-on. But a project like that is very time consuming. You're out there twice a day, feeding every single day, riding and exercising the horse. But then we also have a community club model, and that community-based club, they have multiple project areas. So they'll meet, say, once a month in all project areas come together, and then they'll have their project-specific clubs, like their art, or we even have welding. They'll meet on specific nights, once to twice a month.
Gotcha. Okay. So you may have one focus that you're in, but then you can kind of explore what the other ones are.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So with the animals, like with the horses, for example, so does the child actually own the horse, or is it owned by 4-H and the child comes and cares for it?
Oh, that's a really good question. So 4-H doesn't own any livestock or animals, but a lot of times kids might come to a club like that where it's a barrier up front because it's expensive. Yeah. And they might enter into a lease agreement through connections that we have. So we might connect them to a barn owner or a club leader that's aware of a lease situation that could be an opportunity. Okay. So there's a chance to make some of those connections. We also have, for example, like sample lease agreements. We could say here, and we encourage that to be in place. Here's what a horse lease agreement might look like. Sure. Sometimes those are $0. They're just what we call a care lease. Okay. So the member would have to contribute toward, feeding, watering, vet bills. Okay. And then I'm trying to think. I have a couple different questions. I'm trying to think of which one to ask first. I know sometimes, because I remember when I was a kid, my mom would always be saying, go find a hobby, go do something. Yeah. And from a developmental standpoint, I'm guessing it's pretty intentional that each club only has one focus, right? So like kids aren't just kind of scattered throughout, that it's you stick with one thing and see it through. Is that a pretty intentional way of doing that? Yeah, but I would say that most kids, they'll try a few different project areas out. And, the community club that I mentioned, which is a very large setting, like when they all gather together, they'll do, club spotlights. So here's what we're up to in shooting sports, and here's what we're up to in our art. And that way they are getting an opportunity to see some other areas of interest. We call those sparks in 4-H in the research model. And that is something that you're really like driven to do. Okay. That you have this like intense interest in it and curiosity in it. And so part of the experience is also to expose kids and even adults too, to learning what their own sparks are. So basically those sparks, so, you try a few things, you find something like, oh my gosh, like I want to do this. And that is what you stick with. In that sense, a lot of times. Okay. Right. The idea is to, also build some of those soft skills like perseverance. And many of the project areas have what we call project advancements. So there's, knowledge tests that kids go through along the way and skill building that they develop along the way. So that's kind of one of those life skills is that perseverance and wanting to continually pursue the next new knowledge and refine and improve those skills as they go through the project time. So do you get much visibility on students that come through, like maybe they start and you're like, oh, wow, like this student really needs to have some of these skills. They find a project and stick with it. Like, have you seen some of those transformative stories or how kids are impacted when they join? Most definitely, yeah. Okay. And I can even give my daughter as an example. Oh, okay, yeah. When she first came to 4-H, she was extremely shy, even kind of awkward, very sensitive kind of kid. And she came to 4-H and she picked her few project areas and she found other kids that shared her spark. So that was a big, like that sort of affinity group that helped her come out of her shell or prepare her to learn some communication skills. Eventually, through sharing sparks with other people and also sharing community, like a larger group of caring adults and kids and friendships, she developed some really good communication skills and she went on to become an amazing public speaker. Oh, wow. To this day. So that was one of her areas in 4-H that she ended up developing was communication. And that seems like a common thread with many of the clubs is developing communication. So what is the connection between, so one of these sparks, like, so one of the areas where a student's really interested, what does that look like to develop the communication side within students? Is it just speaking on the topic that they're learning about? Well, it's twofold really, because it's just the club experience. You going to the meetings. We use parliamentary procedure. We have officers elected that are youth officers with the club. So a kid might learn how to take minutes, and be the club secretary. How to, take a vote to approve the minutes, those kind of skills. But also there's communication project areas. So they might enter in a formal presentation at the fair and go through the process of editing that, revising that. They might do videography and bring that project to fair. So it's both. Okay. Both experiences that lead to that communication.
Okay. Exposure. And what does it look like? Because I'm now really intrigued, thinking of, from the time you go to a club, and are these usually an evening or throughout the day? Or maybe it depends on
Evenings,
the club.
Evenings, weekends, depending on the club and when the leader can meet, when the families can meet, so they'll agree on a time that works.
Okay. And how big are these clubs typically?
They could be as small as, say, 8 to up to 50 for the larger community type club that I mentioned. But, most of them I would say are between 8 and 20 members.
Okay. And is something where the parents are there with the kids, or the kids are by themselves, or how does that part work?
It's also dependent upon the club and the age of the club. Like with the Cloverbud Club, that with a younger kid, a lot of times those parents will stay on and kind of work alongside of them. Or, if the parent wants to drop the kid off and that works, then they can do that. So it's somewhat flexible there too.
Okay. Now, what does a typical club look like? So you mentioned they might do the pledge, and they have the parliamentary process. So like kind of a sequence of events of what it might feel like to experience.
Yeah, good question. I'm super happy to say that our dog obedience clubs are back after not having them for a few years due to the shutdown. And I just visited one of their meetings. So a typical meeting would be the president of the club would call the meeting to order, 4-H pledge, some kind of fun, engaging activity. So not a traditional like role taking, but an icebreaker type activity, because that sense of belonging is very important, and creating relationships as the kids get to know each other. Yeah. Especially coming out of COVID in person, like we're not all great at interaction in person. So everyone needs to practice that a little bit. So like a fun game that would be, 5-10 minutes. There might be some kids that want to pass some of their advancements. So it might be a knowledge test on, say, the parts of the dog or different diseases of the dog. So they might come up and do that. And then they would just go ahead and say, we're going to bring our dogs in. And so they, have them aside in the crates during the business part of the meeting. And then they go ahead and have a working meeting. And at that time, the sort of project specialist, and those are the adult volunteers. We've got an amazing team of 4 leaders who are starting this new dog club and are doing a great job with it. Then they would then sort of give the instructions on the skill building piece of it for a short time. And then the idea with 4-H with the learning model is learn by doing. So they're out there, so they might be doing a showmanship pattern. So leaders might just get up for 10 minutes and say, this is the pattern we're working on. And then the kids are going to do it, and then they're going to pause and reflect on it, do it some more, kind of process it. So it's a learn by doing.
Okay. And then so they kind of end with that
Yeah, then they would wrap it up by, a debrief, talking about the next meeting, checking in with everybody. And some of the logistical pieces would come back there at the end of that.
Gotcha. Okay. So what does it take for a child to join? Like, what's the associated cost, or is there one?
So at this point in the 4-H year, it's $40 for the year.
Okay. Which is pretty affordable compared to...
Very affordable. Yes, for sure. And we do offer scholarship. So we just sort of work those out on a case by case basis. We have families that come in and we have that conversation with them. The 4-H year starts October 1. Okay. So that $40 is good for the full year. And we close our enrollment in April. So between April and then the following October, we can't enroll anymore.
Oh, wow.
We'll open it back up again.
So, for example, to enroll in October 2023 to October 2024, you have to be signed up by April of this year?
Yes.
Okay. So why is there that gap?
Well, a lot of that was based upon livestock. So it takes a long time to raise an animal to market. And then we have, of course, our horse project or our dog obedience, really. It's a long time that those members are working on their project to prepare for fair. So we want that to be a positive experience when the kids come to fair. And in order to have that, there really needs to be experiences throughout the year with that project so that it's meaningful. And they're not going there. And, first of all, there's safety involved if you're bringing an animal. And for the other projects, like static projects, like let's say a kid joins photography, they want to have a chance to practice that, gain some of the skills before they then go to the county fair, which is really the culminating activity. And then they can go on to state fair as well at a higher competitive level.
So if someone wanted to join, say, in May, they wouldn't be able to join until October of 2024? Okay. So it's kind of like a wait list kind of thing, like you sign up and then...
October of 2023. So...
Oh, so it's not... Oh, I thought you meant so it's not April of this year for 2023. So like if someone wanted to join now, they could still...
They can still join right now.
Oh, okay. So they're not having to wait until it starts again in October? Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and if someone did come in, say, May, June, July, leading up to fair, after that April deadline, then we would have, we'd have a list.
Gotcha.
So that we could open it when it does open back up.
Gotcha. Okay. And so if someone wanted to I think you might have kind of answered this, but I'll just ask it again. If someone wanted to get involved or learn more about this, or maybe even be a volunteer, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so interested volunteers, I would be the first stop. And there are lots of different ways to volunteer in 4-H. You don't have to commit to being a club leader. We also have what are called our resource leaders. Our resource leaders are more like support leaders, and so they might help out with short-term educational events. We have a resource leader who just organized a sewing event, for example. We might have volunteers that are area experts. So if you have a beekeeping club, it might be a volunteer that comes 3-4 times throughout the year to share expertise. So yeah, that first stop is me. And then I kind of do an initial interview, find out, what that volunteer really has as personal sparks and what that person wants to get out of the experience, so that I can then try to match that either with an existing club or creating a new club, matching with potentially other leaders and finding what the time commitment, what the availability is.
Okay.
And so forth and so on. And then after that, we go through the more logistical piece, which is criminal history check, references, volunteer application, and there's no cost for the volunteer to go through that.
Okay.
At the end of that time, then we have an orientation, which is 2 to 3 hours, where we'll kind of go through all of the logistical pieces of 4-H that are applied to like what type of leader they are.
Okay. And this is one of the questions I didn't prepare you for, but something I'd like to ask each of the people I interview is, given your involvement here, you spend a lot of time around the youth of our community, but what gives you hope for the future of Newburgh?
Oh, wow. I would say the dedicated volunteers that I see that are multi-generational and that are sort of carrying that torch on. We do have a contingent of that in Yamhill County, and that really gives me a lot of hope. And I will say that they have dedication that doesn't have a ceiling on it. And I've had some of those longtime volunteers when I've asked them things like, well, what's your bandwidth? And they would say, I will do anything for 4-H.
Wow.
So that really gives me a lot of hope to see those adults that are so engaged and so committed to the program, because they've seen the magic that it does. And for many of them, that it did in their own lives, and then in their kids' lives, and even their grandkids' lives and generations. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of, one of the 4 parts of the 4-H system is the loyalty, right? So what was it? Was it Hearts for Loyalty?
Heart to Greater Loyalty,
Heart to Greater Loyalty. And it sounds like 4-H really is one of those things that people feel very loyal to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I appreciate so much what you're doing. And as a part of 4-H, I think it is such an amazing program, because I think this really is what young people need. And even things like learning how to be loyal to something is lost on many people, what that even means in many ways. But I look forward to getting the word out about 4-H and seeing if we can get more kids involved that maybe would have been the great fit, but maybe wouldn't have known about it or didn't know what it was to get involved. So if you're listening to this and have kids who you think might be interested, feel free to reach out to Rainey or, and what was the website?
You can just type in Yamahill County 4-H,
okay,
and it's going to come up as part of that extension website.
Okay, and I'll have that in the description notes as well.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fun getting to know you a bit more and learn more about 4-H. Look forward to getting this out to the community.
Thank you very much for doing this and for having me on this podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Givingtown podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think might benefit from hearing it. While more and more people are continuing to hear about this podcast, I still need your help to spread the message about all the people and organizations that make Newberg so great. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.